So round 4, last round, Goblin Guide, Lightning Bolt, two very powerful magic cards. It's close games, but didn't quite get there. This round we're on the play, and I like keeping these hands that have Serum Visions. So one island and Serum Visions is basically perfect in terms of like the reason for playing Serum Visions, because that'll let you draw a card, so that's one card, then scry 2. So if you don't find a land there, you're going to then on your next draw step, you're going to dig 4 cards deeper to find a land. If we don't have a land in our top 4 cards, well, whatever. Like, you know, what can you do? So we can almost certainly assume that there's at least one land in our top 4 cards, and so we can put that on top and draw it next turn. And then our turn 2 play would be Spreading Seas. So then if let's say there's one in our top 3 or 4 cards, then we get to Spreading Seas and replace itself and draw another card if we want to, or we could play the Copter. I'm more inclined to play the Spreading Seas because when we find the third land, we play the Copter, or I'm sorry, we play the Architect, and we could tap the Architect immediately to play the Copter. Or if we wanted to, we could play the Ballista, but I'd probably wait till the following turn for that. So this hand looks like it's, pretty reasonable. Okay, so it was a Field of Ruin and a Spellstutter Sprite. So we drew a Field of Ruin, and then we found Field of Ruin Spellstutter. And I believe that I put them both on top. We can check. Actually, I put them both on bottom. Right, because I don't know what my opponent is playing, so I don't know how effective Field of Ruin is. But I already have the one field, so the second field would give me a third mana, but it would be a colorless mana. I need blue mana to cast a turn 3 Architect. That's really what I'm going for. So neither of those cards really help me to get the turn 3 Architect. I'd rather just put them both on the bottom and take my chances with the Spreading Seas and my next draw step finding me that third blue. So that's what I did there. So Spreading Seas their land. The Dark Confidant. We do draw the island, but instead of playing Copter, I play one of our Ballistas, because all we're drawing are more Ballistas, and we don't want them to draw cards off of their Dark Confidant. So we just went ahead and traded that. So that was pretty sweet tempo play there, right? We got to cast our turn 3 Architect, which is what we want to do on turn 3 anyway. And then we also killed the Dark Confidant. So we basically got, the free value off of the Architect's mana to cast the Ballista. So that was pretty sweet. Got a free Dark Ritual worth of value. EE for 2. Okay, well you can't sack it yet, and that's not really helpful so far. So here we just wanted to play the Copter. Now, I think in hindsight that was wrong to play the Copter there, because we already had a Spreading Seas on their land. And I think that they might have been, since they played the EE for 2, they might have been just planning on sacking it anyway. And so I think that playing the Copter to force them to do that was maybe not the best decision. But anyway, I don't know. That might have been close. But then they played Abrupt Decay to kill one of our Architects. So we only have one Architect. We'd rather just play a Ballista for 3 instead of attacking for 1. The play seems pretty obvious. Abrupt Decay, okay, well, 3 to your face in response. And Tarmogoyf, that's a big boy. Just put out a Ballista as a 3/3. Take 6. They play Tracker. So here's our situation. We're gonna have to deal with this Tarmogoyf at some point. It's a 6/7. And now they're playing a tracker to get up on cards. If we let this fetch resolve, then they're going to get a second clue, and then if they play, let's say it's a basic, because it looks like they're just straight green black. So they get a basic, then they could sack the clue if they want to make it a 4/3 tracker. So I'm thinking I kind of have to deal with this tracker. But I decide it's like I really feel like I need to just have a draw step. So obviously, if they just leave the 2 mana untapped, they can sack the clue like whenever it's most convenient for them. And then if they don't and they just take their turn, they could just sack the 2 clues to make it a 5/4. And if they play another land, especially if it's a fetch land, then they could have access to 6 mana and 3 to 4 clues and make it like a 6/5. And then they'd have 3 creatures that are out of hand. But now it's like, okay, well, I need to try to deal with this Tarmogoyf because I'm at 14 and it's a 6/7. And we do actually have kind of the means to do it in a couple turns. Like if we just pump mana into the Ballista. And then they played a second Tarmogoyf. So that sort of complicated things. Now, what we're doing here, we Serum Visions. Because this Wanderer isn't really, I mean, it is going to help us, but like it might have been wrong to play the Serum Visions because we want to have an extra blue to make the Ballista blue. But I felt like I really needed to draw into something. So we found a land anyway. And then Architect and Spreading Seas. So what did I do with those? Bottom. So the Spreading Seas isn't going to help us at this point. We need to deal with these Tarmogoyfs in this tracker, not their Overgrown Tomb. And then so another Architect isn't going to help us terribly. So basically now, at this point, we just play the island and play the Wanderer. So now we can pump the Ballista twice. We're going to take some hits from these Tarmogoyfs, I think. I'm thinking at this point, I just want to kill that tracker while I can. And I know that I'm setting up to make the Tarmogoyf at 3/3. The question is, do I need to chump block? I think I do. Just to save some damage. So I'm going to put a counter on the Ballista. Set up to put another counter on the Ballista. Alright, well, now they play Liliana. This Ballista is basically our chance at victory. It's a slim chance, a very slim chance at this point. But the Architect isn't going to help us get there any more than the Ballista. Which might not be true. Like it's possible that what I should have done was just like shoot Liliana and then sacrifice the Ballista so I have the Architect and then I draw Master of Waves, because in the Master of Waves would give me 3/3/2s. So then I have, in addition to the Master, so I'd have 4/3/2s and a 1/3. So I could maybe chump block or even take the one Tarmogoyf. And then, yeah, I think it might have been wrong to keep the Ballista. I think I was supposed to keep the Architects to give myself Master as an out. But we drew a land anyway. And then they just abrupt decay Walking Ballista, they have a 7/8 Tarmogoyf, 2/7/8 Tarmogoyfs, and we're just dead. So yeah, that game kind of got out of hand pretty quickly with those Tarmogoyfs. So for what we do in this matchup, it's kind of the same thing we do against Jund or Abzan. I consider those all kind of the same decks. I call it Black Green X Rock because they all function very similar to each other. Like some of the nuances, like Lingering Souls versus Culligan's Command, makes you sideboard a little bit differently, but for the most part, they're just green-black mid-range value decks. And for these decks, I take out Mausoleum Wanderer because, like, I mean, Abrupt Decay can't be countered. They don't have a lot of spells that can be countered by the Wanderer, and just the body doesn't really match up against anything of theirs. So that's just our weakest card in this matchup. And I brought in the Basilisk Collar, the Trinket Mage, the Pithing Needle, and the Brittle Effigy. If you don't have the Effigy, then I would not bring in the Explosives, because Explosives for 1 doesn't do much, and for 0 doesn't do much. But I would just bring in something else instead, like a Void Mage Prodigy, something like that. Um, but yeah, the Basilisk Collar is huge in this matchup because imagine like this board position. If we had a Basilisk Collar, we just hook it up to the Ballista and we just shoot both the Tarmogoyfs, and they have no board. Like a Basilisk Collar would be great, and Trinket Mage to go find our good cards. Then Pithing Needle mostly for Liliana, but also you could randomly get certain other cards at certain points. Like they probably have Hissing Quagmire, which if they drew multiple Hissing Quagmires, and there's a scenario where that was good, but mostly for Liliana. Alright, so game 2. We hard drew our Collar, and we have a Ballista. And so on the play, Spreading Seas is pretty good. I think what we're looking for off the Serum Visions is a third land. So let's see what we do here. Spreading Seas and click. We drew a Spellstutter Sprite. So back-to-back, seas into seas is pretty good. See what we did here. A click and a seas. We put bottom top. So I think that we bottomed the click and we topped the seas. We're about to find out. Yep. So I figure, well, unfortunately they played a fetch land on turn 1 and didn't crack it, so that was a little awkward. So we didn't get to do our seas plan. Now we're kind of regretting having the second seas, but we did not anticipate that, I suppose. I still think it was right. So they have a lot of 1-drops in their deck, like discard spells. We drew a land. We still would rather just kill the Dark Confidant. I think that card's just something that needs to die. Even though we have the Collar and like the Basilisk Collar plus Ballista is a really sweet combo at mowing down their team. Like the Dark Confidant, just getting cards is their way really to get ahead. So we have the Trinket Mage to go get a Ballista, so we can reassemble the combo. We're not super concerned about that. We just don't want them to gain a significant advantage off the Dark Confidant. So discard one of these Spreading Seas, no problem. Draw Academy Ruins. So we're just going to Trinket Mage for Pithing Needle and Needle this Liliana. Because the Academy Ruins that we drew can get us back the Ballista. So this is shaping up to be a pretty interesting game. Oh no! Oh, I forgot. Magic Online with the replays, whenever you name a card, it just bugs out and stops. This was a really good game too. I remember it. So I can I can explain what happened in this game. When I was testing Nevermore in the Mono White Devotion, it did the same thing every time played Nevermore because it doesn't process naming a card. So anyway, what ended up happening in this game, it was a very long game, and Academy Ruins was the key card. So what happened was they I believe it was Abrupt Decayed my Basilisk Collar because I hooked up the collar onto the Trinket Mage. They played a creature like a Tarmogoyf or something, and so the Trinket Mage was holding back the 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 Tarmogoyf. So then they tried to Abrupt Decay my Collar, and I redirected to Spellskite, and I had drawn a land, so I put Spellskite on top of my library, and then I drew my Spellskite and replayed the Spellskite. So then Spellskite and Academy Ruins together was basically protecting all of my permanents. It's like protecting my Pithing Needle and protecting my Collar. And so then I had active Collar, and the Needle shut down the Liliana, and then the Collar and the Trinket Mage was working out. And then once I had a reprieve where they just like played another creature, I Academy Ruins back the Walking Ballista. So then I was able to set up the Walking Ballista and hook up the Collar to the Ballista, and so then I was able to set up like mowing down their team. So then I would just like block creatures, sack, shoot. So it was like I started shooting down their team, and then they tried to kill my card again, and I redirected to Spellskite, then put Spellskite back on top of my deck, recast Spellskite, and then re-equipped and set everything up again. And basically, I just was Academy Ruinsing the Ballista and the Spellskite and the Collar um, until I just sort of set it like that. That was my combo that I used to win this game, which I thought was pretty sweet. Would have liked to be able to see it, but um, get to at least explain how that all panned out. So then game 3, all right. So this game we keep this hand. It's 2 lands, a Serum Visions. We're just looking for a third land. The Void Mage Prodigy. I did bring that. I'm trying to think of what I boarded out. I know I boarded out the Wanderers. I might have boarded a little bit differently for game 3 to bring in some number of Void Mages. Maybe I'll search my library and we can see what it was. Inquisition, take our Trinket Mage. It's probably a smart choice. So Effigy and land. We want the land. We don't really want the Effigy. Draw the land. Ballista, go ahead and kill that. Dark Confidant. Scavenging Ooze, that's a good one. And they ooze away our Ballista. Okay. Might backfire if you play Tarmogoyf. Now there's no artifact. So we just go ahead and click them on their draw step. See what they have. Tracker, Explosives, Swamp. So I think we take the Tracker here. Yep, we took the Tracker, leaving them with Explosives and Swamp. It's because we don't want them to get ahead on cards. Same reason we get rid of the Dark Confidant. Okay, so the Scavenging Ooze is getting kind of big. Alright, there we go. Now we can see what we boarded in. We boarded in 3 Void Mage Prodigies, evidently. I can't tell what we boarded out. Looks like we boarded out a... No, they exiled the Ballista. Oh, we boarded out... Now we have our Serum Visions. No, we have all our Vendilion clicks. Spellstone, no, we have those. Spreading Seas? Yes, we boarded out Spreading Seas for this game. That's what we did. We boarded out Spreading Seas for game 3 in favor of Void Mage Prodigies. Which, that makes sense, I think, because they're a 2-color deck, so they're a little less inhibited by Spreading Seas. And as we saw the previous game, it didn't do a whole lot for us. So that's the change that we made. And then here, we're Trinket Maging. And we can pretty much get anything we want, and we decide Brittle Effigy, because that's the way to deal with the ooze. So then we Serum Visions into, ooh, that's pretty good. Get that Master at Waves. Just take it, go to 10. Field of Ruin us. See, that was pretty effective play. So we put the Master of Waves on top of our library so that we were about to master for 4 on the next turn, and they Field of Ruined us to shuffle our library and get rid of our Field of Ruin. So that was a pretty strong play for them. And then they played a Tarmogoyf. So now we draw a Vial, which is like the worst card we could draw instead of the best. But now we have Void Mage Prodigy. So even though we're like behind on board, now we kind of have our piece that is pretty effective in this spot. We can counter any spell they play. We could sack any of our creatures to counter any spell. So now we can effectively set up a double block, where the only card they could have that would disrupt us is Abrupt Decay, because it can't be countered. So they attack with both, as would be kind of expected since we're at 10. You know, like, if they're going to attack at all, it should be with both, because the only good block we have is a double block on one of them, which means the other one gets through. So they're basically going to 2-for-1 us here and get one of the creatures through. And the Scavenging Ooze is the bigger threat, especially if we're talking about, like, if we trade 2-for-1 with the Tarmogoyf, that sends 3 creatures to the graveyard, and they can just eat them all and have an 8/8 Ooze, which is going to be, I mean, we have the Effigy already, so we can still deal with it. Like, that's not the end of the world. But my thinking is I definitely want to kill the Ooze over the Tarmogoyf just because it's bigger and more immediate of a threat. So we double block. They don't have the decay. So the Tarmogoyf gets bigger now. And they play Ooze. So we'll just lose our last creature, lose our Prodigy, deal with the Ooze. Because they could just immediately make the Ooze into a 5/5, and we're in the same position we were in before. So they basically destroyed our whole board. That's fine. And now we draw Master of Waves. Okay. We're just going to play the Brittle Effigy and then leave the click. So we don't need to play it yet. So it's possible that I should have played the click on their draw step, because then we could see what they have. If they drew like a tracker or something, we would want to take the tracker. If not, we would consider taking the explosives, because it can kill the Brittle Effigy, which is I think what they're doing here. But my thinking instead was I want to click. I really want to click myself and get rid of this Vial, and then untap and cast the Master of Waves, because then that'll give me like 3 elemental tokens, and that's enough to really effectively deal with this Tarmogoyf anyway. So that was my thinking for that. And as you can see, my clock was pretty low. This was a pretty drawn out game. Game 2 ended up taking a long time, as you could tell from the Academy Ruins recursions, which is why they probably were just like, all right, let's get rid of this now. We're not going to lose another game to that card. But, so I Vendilion click. I target myself. Get rid of this Ether Vial. That's not doing much for us at this point. Get another Ballista. Not the best, not the worst. Draw an island. Okay, get the attack in so that if you did draw like an Abrupt Decay, I want to know now. The attack gets through, so then post-combat, I play Master of Waves, get 3 tokens. They play Thoughtseize, take one of our Ballistas, fetch, attack. Now, I am going to go for the triple block. So there's some merits to different things. If they have something like, let's say they drew an Abrupt Decay or a Fatal Push, well, then it would be better to quadruple block, because then if they Fatal Push or Abrupt Decay, they can't target the Master. I mean, otherwise they just do it pre-combat and kill us. But they can target an Elemental. So if we triple block with the Elementals and they kill one of the Elementals, then that's only 4 damage to the Tarmogoyf, and the Tarmogoyf lives. So that's kind of problematic. But if they didn't draw exactly a removal spell, an Abrupt Decay or a Fatal Push right here, And did they just crack? Yeah, they cracked their fetch line. So if it's a fatal push, it could kill the master and they would win anyway. So it had to be basically exactly Abrupt Decay that we'd be playing around by giving up our elemental here. But then if they don't have it, then they're just getting our elemental, our Master of Waves is dying for no reason. So that was kind of a big decision on my part whether to triple or quadruple block, and I went with triple block because I felt like uh, having an attack for 5 versus 3 meant that I play the Ballista for 2, and they're just it's a they have 1 draw step instead of 2 basically at this point. Yeah, so I'm basically taking away a draw step, but opening myself up to getting blown out by exactly Abrupt Decay on this draw step. So that was the risk I took, and it worked out. And then they played Kalidas. Kalidas right after I just got rid of all my tokens. Okay, so this game, they have no cards in hand. They have a Kalidas now, though. So this is actually quite a close game. So I attack for 3, is worth 3, put them down to 9. So they attack with Kalidas, and well, I have to block. I single block with the Master of Waves. Now, if I let damage resolve, then they're going to get a 2/2, which they're going to get no matter what, but then they're also going to gain 3 life and go to 12. So I chose to remove a Ballista counter after blocks to kill our Master, uh, so that they don't gain the life. So they get the zombie no matter what, but they stay at 9. This gives us more cards we can draw. Bam! That's a good one. We draw a Master of Waves. So we get our tokens. We attack with our click, putting them to 6. Now they attack with both their creatures. Now, I'm thinking, I mean, my clock is thinking I need to kill them on my next turn. But even aside from the clock, I when a token dies, nothing bad happens. And if I block like this, they go to 9, but then I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could add a counter to the Ballista, that's 9, and then remove the 2 counters, that's 10, 11. So by doing it this way, we're setting up lethal on our turn. They play a Tarmogoyf. All right, so now they can't block the click. They can only block one of our 3 creatures. So let's say they block a Master of Waves. Well, then they take 3 from the click, 2 from the elemental, that's 5. Then if we 6 from the Ballista, if we pump it, that's 7. And then remove a counter, that's lethal. So no matter what ground creature they block, then they're still taking lethal through our board because we just blocked with the elemental tokens. So they have to have a removal spell in hand or they're dead. So I attack with everyone, they block, and something happens. Oh, right. So our opponent, I was like, add a counter and shoot you because he's like block 1, and he's like, yep, you got it. So they conceded when our clock was about to hit 0. So that was nice of our opponent. Very sportsmanlike. But yeah, this ended up being a really good match, and I think that these mid-range type decks, whether it's Jeskai or like Jund, Abzan, Green Black, these are all pretty close matches where the games can go really long. Trinket Mage is an important part of our game plan, and yeah, so this was a pretty good match, and That was black green.